Good morning again, and welcome to the Mustang Family Insights Safer session. Mustang Family Insights is hosted by Parent and Family Programs and is a resource webinar series for Cal Poly parents and supporters featuring campus and community experts. My name is Kanani Makikau, she, hers. I am the Assistant Director for Parent and Family Programs, and I will be your host today. Joining me is Senior Director Tessa Espinoza and Lead Coordinator Stanley Learn. Some housekeeping items to start off with. The Q&A function is enabled, and you are encouraged to type questions during the presentation, which we will try and get to in the last 15 minutes, okay? Additionally, this webinar will be recorded, as you saw today, and put on the Parent and Family Programs website. We will post the link at the end of the session, and if you get a chance, I highly recommend taking a look at the many resource webinars that we have done in the past, because there's some really great ones on there that are really interesting. So today, the entire Parent and Family Programs team is excited to have our valued colleague and Safer Programs campus expert, Irene Tobias, as our guest presenter. Irene is the Survivor Wellness Coordinator at Safer. Irene graduated from California State University, San Bernardino with a bachelor's in sociology. During their time as a student, Irene discovered their passion for supporting survivors. And Irene has worked in violence prevention and survivor advocacy for the past 8 years and is passionate about creating a culture change to best support survivors. So thank you for being here today, Irene. You have the floor.
Hi, Kanani. Hi, everyone. Be patient with me as I share my screen. There we go. I hope y'all are having a great morning. And let's put this into presenter mode. And so my name's Irene, and I'm here to present on behalf of Safer. Today, we're going to be talking about preventing and responding to sexual and relationship violence and how you play a role in that today. I'm going to talk a little bit about Safer and kind of get into our presentation a little bit afterwards. Now, Safer is Cal Poly's prevention education and confidential advocacy resource regarding all gender and power-based violence. When I talk about that word gender and power-based violence, even the words we saw for the title of the presentation, relationship violence, sexual violence, we're encompassing all forms of these violences that we see on the PowerPoint right now. Sexual assault, intimate partner violence, stalking, sexual exploitation, anything from harassment to an actual assault itself. And what that encompasses is really our confidentiality status that helps students, staff, faculty, and supporters and parents like yourself to really learn all your options, your students' options that they have here on or off campus, and really creating that culture shift here on campus as well to promote healthy relationships. Now, Safer exists within Campus Health and Wellbeing. Campus Health and Wellbeing is our university's health center. So for any health services, maybe primary care services, medical services they might need, your students will be entering Campus Health and Wellbeing. Alongside that exists our counseling services, well-being and food pantry, health education, and Safer themselves. Now, I know I briefly discussed a little bit about Safer and what we do. And so really I want to emphasize that on the goal of the presentation for today. And so as an organization within Campus Health and Wellbeing, right, that really values itself on our advocacy and also our prevention efforts, we really want to foster a relationship, right, with our parents and supporters as well to prevent, right, these forms of violence for our students. Now, we know that, your student is one of your most important people in your life, right? And they're an irreplaceable presence, right? And we want to promote healthy relationships here. We know for most of y'all and for ourselves too, that we don't want anyone to harm anyone else, and we don't want others to be harmed themselves. And so we really want to foster this type of relationship where we can share resources, tools with you all to build that partnership, to build that connection, that community with your student as well, to overall, right, promote healthy relationships here at Cal Poly. Now, jumping into a little bit about what this looks like. What does sexual violence look like on a college campus, at Cal Poly, and really what's going on that we've seen so far? And so in the spring of 2020, there was a climate survey where students who identified as having experienced any form of sexual violence responded to this climate survey. Now, there's a few different numbers on this screen. Now, I really want to let y'all know that these numbers, right, can be a little scary, can feel overwhelming. And I want us to talk a little bit about that before kind of really seeing these high numbers. So 28% had experienced some form of sexual assault, majority of within their first year and within a mile of campus. 82% if assaults occurred between people that know each other, and only 66% have told someone about their experience. Now, while these numbers are incredibly high, right? They're big, they're scary, they're large. I want to let y'all know that these numbers and rates of sexual violence, intimate partner violence, and stalking are the same at any university throughout our nation. Unfortunately, college students, right, are at a higher risk, especially with this maybe major transition of high school, young adulthood, and maybe even sometimes moving away from home. Now, these numbers are large, but I really want to focus on that 82%, right, of assaults have occurred between people that know each other. So these aren't strangers, they're not random people, they are people that they know, whether they be on the same floor as them in their dorms, whether they be in the same classrooms, maybe the same clubs or organizations. People who are hurting each other know each other to some capacity. And this is one of the reasons why we really want to highlight our prevention efforts with you all and build that relationship, right? And how we can prevent violence before it even occurs. Now, I talked a little bit about how these numbers can be high, right, throughout all universities throughout the nation. Now, in this field of gender and power-based violence, there is a term known as the red zone. The red zone is known as the first 6 weeks of the beginning of the quarter, the beginning of the semester, depending what university you might attend, where more than 50% of college sexual assaults occur. They can occur between any of these months that are on the PowerPoint, depending on when that quarter or semester might start. But these first 6 weeks when school begins are the highest, right? And they are increased specifically for those first and second semesters. Now, other research even suggests that the red zone is even more concentrated, and assaults statistics spike up even a few days before the school year officially begins, as students start to transition and move in on campus or move in around the area of their college they're attending. Now, this is all scary within itself, right? The red zone. This should be a time of, a great transition, right? Excitement, maybe a new chapter for some of y'all. But this can also be a scary time for some students as well. Now, we don't aim to share this information with y'all to create fear or any scare tactics with y'all as well. We want to be honest with you all so we can work on creating, right, a healthier and equitable campus here at Cal Poly and for your students' experiences themselves. Now, the red zone exists for multiple reasons. It could be their first time away from home. For your student, right? Whether it be you're an hour away or maybe 10 hours away, right? That's still a big distance and a long time being away from home. There could be a lack of cohesive friend groups. Most of the time when they're in middle and high school, they're forming these deep friendship bonds, usually seeing each other all day in classes. And now they're somewhere different, right? And they don't maybe have friends yet or are trying to make them. Power differentials between first years and returning students. There may be an experience with moderate and informed alcohol or other drug use. overlapping anxieties, a lack of explicit models on how to embody their sexuality in an attuned and respectful way, kind of this history and tolerance of sexual assault, and then minimal primary prevention education. Now, these are tons of reasons why the red zone exists. And it could be a variety or a few of them that kind of map up to this. Now, we know this is a lot. This is a big time of transition, right? Like I mentioned, moving away, creating new friends, right? But also, this transition in life in that chapter, right? Of maybe not seeing you every day, maybe, having to do different things now, having to create their own routines. And so we want to make sure for those first 6 weeks that we can best support you all to best support your student, right? That first 6 weeks can determine the rest of your student's future at Cal Poly and beyond when we lean into these prevention efforts. So where do you fit in? I'm talking about your role a little, right, as a parent and supporter. And I've talked a little bit about those risk factors, right? That's the red zone, these transitions, but I want to let you know that there are protective factors. There is a role you play in this that helps you and your student really build the most support that they can get. And this is their connection to a caring adult. So you yourself, just being that parent and supporter, being here today, showing up for your student is playing a factor into this, is playing a protective role in this. That could look like just being unconditional love and support for your student as they navigate this. That could look like maybe guiding them towards resources you might learn or maybe hear about and sharing it with them. Role modeling healthy behaviors and communication, speaking without judgment and being open to learning from them with whatever they might be wanting to share with you. Be explicit with how you hope they treat others and are treated themselves. Foster open communication, especially during those first 6 weeks. Now, I know this list seems like a ton, but I want to let you all know that you most likely are already doing all of this. You most likely are already being there unconditionally with love and support for them. You might already be role modeling this healthy behavior, fostering open communication, being there, speaking without judgment, being open to learning from them. And as you continue this throughout the first 6 weeks, this will only continue to build that protective factor with your student. Now we know experiencing sexual assault, intimate partner violence, and stalking has lifelong impacts. Unfortunately, for that person themselves, we know when it happens that it's going to impact them for times that we will never know. But it also impacts our communities at large. And I really want to share this, right? Because we at Safer believe not only, right, does that person who's experienced this type of harm will have these impacts, but they're sources of support. That could look like you all, parents and supporters, friends, partners, and overall just their community that can feel this impact. But we know that this can be prevented. We know by addressing prevention through a public health lens, we are addressing how violence happens. And how we do that is through evidence-based practices, asset-based transitions, right? And tools and resources that we provide you all to best really guide this protective factor with your student, to build this relationship. And not only that, put it into practice and play with them, to be able to have those first 6 weeks where they can feel unconditionally loved, supported, get the resources and knowledge they need and information, and you will help develop that relationship with them. Now, this is also a big major reason why we developed a dialogue toolkit for you all to work in partnership with us. I talked a little bit about our goals earlier and why we really want to lean on parents and supporters and why that might be applicable to Safer's work as well in this prevention effort to really promote healthy relationships, healthy communication, right? So your student has the best time of their life here. Now, if you are probably on your laptops, but if you have a phone near you, you can open your phone to your camera and scan the QR code. This is also available on our website that you will see in the chat later today to find, but it is our supporter dialogue toolkit. Now, I talked a little bit, right, about how you all play a role in being that protective factor in role modeling, right, healthy behaviors, fostering that open communication. And so some questions that may come up would be, well, how do I do that? Well, what if there's a topic that I don't know how to address yet? What if there's some concerns, but we're not sure how to maybe bring that up with our student yet? This supporter dialogue toolkit will kind of give you and encompass every kind of question that might be coming up when we're having this conversation. There's going to be goals for the toolkit, how to use it, some more background information about Safer, and also just some conversation tips and tricks. It's really made for you to pick and choose where you want to start. There's not a point A that you need to start at. There's not a list of things you need to start doing, but really for you to dive deep into this toolkit to see what education already exists out there, what tips and tricks exist out there, maybe talking points, right? And even how to bring this up with your student so that you can best kind of start opening up this open communication to really transition into the first 6 weeks. I'm going to be talking a little bit about what different things might be in here and what other protective factors might help your student during this transition. So the first one is making friends. Interestingly enough, making friends, building friendships, right? Really links to a positive peer group, right? And linking to community, connectedness. And this is one way, right, that violence can be prevented. Consider maybe asking your students, right, what values would they want their friends to have, right? Where might be finding these friends at, right? Most likely, you have raised your child and now they're off to college in this journey, right? You all know what values, morals, lessons, right? Ethics, whatever y'all call them in your families that are highly important to you, right? What you all cherish. Most of us might cherish a lot of these values at the same time too. And so really asking them what that might look like, what friendships look to that like to them, what values would they want in these groups. If they're not sure where to start or where to make friends or where to find people with these values, you can always search the club directory on the website. And really make a dream list. I know there's also, I think, the club showcase during WOW. And so you can see all the sources of orgs, clubs, really any way for your student to get connected. Now, another protective factor is setting boundaries. We might have heard boundaries maybe as of recently. I think it's been a conversation that's just been kind of coming up as of recently. And I really want to let y'all know that as we learn how to set boundaries, we might not know what those look like yet, especially for young people, especially during this transition. So maybe opening up this conversation can help them define and think of what that might look like for them. Now, boundaries help us define what we're comfortable with and how we want to be treated by others. Boundaries can work for any type of relationship, not just romantic. They could work for friendships, right? With a mentor, maybe with the president of their club, at work, right? And in any relationship, boundaries are really crucial to maintaining a healthy connection. Being firm, being clear can be a way of signaling, right, to that other party that you care about the relationship. You care about the communication, right? And you want to work on this in a healthy way. And that is why we set these boundaries. Now, boundaries can be different for all. In the toolkit, I believe it'll go a little bit more in depth about what that might look like. Boundaries don't have to be physical. They could also be emotional, mental, and they could look very differently. Now, as we know how to and learn how to maybe set boundaries, it might be also important to know how to respond to boundaries. Now, I think for us, setting boundaries and creating maybe that list, right, that we come up with, okay, I like this, I don't like this, can be a little bit easier. But responding to boundaries can be hard, honestly. It can be hard to hear the word no. It can be hard to feel rejected. But we want to remember that boundaries really set and pave the pathway to a healthier relationship. To maybe help navigate this conversation, right? Consider a time where you ever felt rejected, right? Whether it be by a former partner, whether it be by a job offer, whether it be by a friend, right? And it didn't feel good, right? Maybe we didn't like it, but how did we respond to it, right? Opening up a little bit about ourselves to our student can sometimes help them understand and see you as being human as well. And knowing that you were able to do some of these things as well. Maybe the language is different, right? Maybe we didn't have these resources that we have now, but letting them know how to respond to boundaries is just as important, right? Once we get that no or a boundary, right, how might we want to respond to it, and what we might be hearing also that could be registering as a boundary. So no could be a boundary, but it could also look like and sound like, no, thank you, I'm not ready. You know what, I changed my mind. How about we do this instead? Maybe we could do that later. No might also look like different things, right? Silence, shrugging, pushing away, but also how we respond to those no's, right? Receiving that no. Sometimes there might be that awkwardness, right? Maybe your student won't know how to respond yet. And so after receiving a no, that could look like them letting the other person, thank you for letting me know, or that's okay. Do you want to talk about it with me? Or I'm glad you let me know. I'm glad you said something. Is there anything else I could do? Similarly to the setting boundaries piece, in our toolkit, there is a more lengthy piece about responding to boundaries and what that could look like, and some of those prompts to help maybe help that conversation with your student on how to respond to these boundaries. Now, another protective factor can really be that education piece, right? I talked a little bit about the red zone, right? And all of these reasons that might exist. And one of those was minimal primary prevention education, right? A lack of comprehensive sexual education, sexuality. And so at times, there might be some confusions between sex and a sexual assault, what that looks like, what that doesn't look like. And sometimes talking with our students can help distinguish that. The biggest difference between the two is bodily autonomy, right? Bodily autonomy is the biggest one. Sex is voluntary, right? It is consensual, right? It is an act, a consensual voluntary act between people who have the capacity, right? An agency to make those decisions. Versus sexual assault is when there isn't consent, right? There isn't consent. There might be a violation, right? There is no asking anyone. And it takes away the power of the other person to either make that decision, whether through manipulation, threats, coercion, and a variety of other weapons sometimes used for sexual assault. Now, I know this can be sometimes an uncomfortable conversation to have, especially with your students. So I really want to turn to that toolkit again, right? And let you know that there is a piece of that in the toolkit as well on how to start this conversation, what to bring up, and what to distinguish between the two. But keeping in mind that the biggest ones is that bodily autonomy, right? That when they're comfortable, when they are ready, when they are consenting to sex, right? Having that healthy relationship with someone compared to the latter, right? Where there is no consent, there is maybe a violation or power taken away from them giving an answer. Now, another form can be of learning more about this protective factor is alcohol and sexual assault. Now, we have seen, and research shows that students whose parents talk to them about alcohol use in college tend to drink less compared to those peers who have not had the conversation. And so, having to lean into this conversation with your student, right? I know there's some, I think, tips and tricks in our toolkit as well, but I really want to link this back to that value piece, right? What does consuming alcohol, right? What values does that have in your family, right? Or drug use, right? Any type of substance use. Linking that back to your family and how you all talk about it, right? Whether it be you're sharing experiences with your student and opening up a little, whether it be you all go through some education, right? And kind of learning a little bit more about this. But regardless, having the conversation sometimes, right, leads to that less alcohol use compared to those peers since we're already having the conversation. I think that example shows in itself that prevention efforts work, right? Before even thinking, having your child go to college, right? And then maybe getting into those spaces of alcohol being involved, you're having that conversation with them. And they're able to make that decision based off of, right, their protective factors. Now, when alcohol is linked to sexual assault, we often might hear the terms that alcohol causes a sexual assault or instigates a sexual assault. Now, we want to say that someone may consciously or unconsciously, right, drink alcohol to have a justification for assaulting someone, right? But just because we consumed it doesn't mean we deserve to be assaulted. Oftentimes, alcohol is used as a weapon, right? And a catalyst, a weapon to incapacitate someone, to harm them, and also a weapon to those around us, right? To incapacitate them as well. If we think about it, the person who might be harmed, right, might not be able to make that decision, right? There is no consent involved. And also maybe everyone else at the party, whether it be friends, people around, right? Or incapacitated themselves. It may have a harder time with judgment, right? With maybe seeking safety, right? With maybe getting resources. And so we really want to highlight those factors as well when alcohol plays a part into this. Now, there's also a chapter in the toolkit linking alcohol and sexual assault and how to have these conversations. And I also want to encourage you all to look at our well-being website that really has some more information on alcohol and other drugs and those prevention efforts. Now, the next one is accountability. Now, accountability can be hard, right? I think earlier in the beginning, I had mentioned that, your student is, one of the most important people in your life, right? And they're an irreplaceable presence in your life, right? You've seen them grow, you've seen them love and scream and cry, and we've got it all the way here, right? And we know that you don't want your student to harm someone else or be harmed themselves, right? I think we can all agree to all of our students here, right? We want to create that culture of promoting healthy relationships, healthy communication. And so thinking about accountability, we like to talk about this quote. We judge others by our intentions and others by their behaviors, right? And so we might mean well, right? We might have not intended to harm someone. We might have not had these intentions to really hurt people or use our control over them, right? But the impact is everlasting. And so do we have control over our intent? Absolutely, we all do. But do we have control over our impact? Not always. right? Kind of reminds me a little bit about boundary setting, and also that intent versus impact. You might mean well and intend well, right? When we maybe do an action, but that impact, since everyone is different, right, will not always be the same. It's not going to be the same for every person. And in order to build community, right, to build peers, to promote healthy relationships, right, sometimes that involves accountability, and that can be hard. Now, the toolkit has a piece on this as well. And we really urge you all to, when having these conversations with your students, to also, right, maybe open up a little, whether it be about yourselves, your own relationships, maybe a friend that you saw during your time as a student or a young person, and having to maybe set an example of what that accountability looked like when you had to take it. It could look like, right, maybe something as small as, you forgot to do an errand for a friend and you made that promise, to maybe, hurting someone, and how we had to maybe, right, take that accountability and responsibility, to really, right, build this healthier relationship with them. Now, I want to remind you all of the Dialogue Toolkit. I think I have one more slide before, but I wanted to bring this QR code just in case if y'all haven't got it yet. I'm going to just leave it up for another second. I've been talking a little bit about this supporter dialogue toolkit, and I really just want to highlight it because everything that I've mentioned, all of these touch points of protective factors that I've mentioned are going to be in here. If you're still having these questions of, I don't know how to bring these conversations up, or I'm not sure, how to talk about some of these things, how do I bring them up in casual conversation? I really urge you to read through this. Now, I know it's going to be a little lengthy, but there is a table of contents if you want to go through it and find those. If there's a particular topic that I mentioned, go to that page, on accountability, go to that page on setting boundaries, right? And utilize those talking points, discussion prompts, right? Think creatively too of your own ways, and how your family communicates, right? What your family values. Maybe even examples, whether it be about yourself or a close friend or something that you witnessed too as a young adult, to really make that connected factor. Now, lastly, I want to say the last protective factor is reaching out for help, right? Reaching out for help is really important, especially during those first 6 weeks if you notice your student is struggling. Now, right now, what you can do is something you're probably already doing, and that's just being an unconditional support, right? Placing yourself at that position as unconditional support, guidance, unconditional love, right? And reinforcing that with your student. So that might look like in these next 6 weeks, checking in regularly on the phone, FaceTime, texting, however you all like to communicate, reminding your students of resources available to them on campus, whether that look like the ones you're learning about today, the ones you've learned about later on, or even as you're browsing our websites and seeing what you find as well. Asking them about their friendships and the community connections your student is making. Are they developing those friendships? Are the friendships having those values, right? Are they maybe reaching out to these clubs or organizations that they were interested on? And then similarly, asking them about academics. If you're noticing that they're struggling or they're needing additional support, right? Linking them back to those resources that you learned about, right? Linking them back to maybe these websites, the pages you found about for accommodations, or maybe a tutor, or maybe they need to talk to an academic advisor. And lastly, reaffirming the values that you raised your student with. Right? I think for a lot of us, these values are strong for us. They hold us. They essentially, were brought together. You brought this together for your student so they can be this amazing, awesome person that you want them to be. And they're going to be here, right? But really placing yourself as this unconditional support, especially during this first 6 weeks, is going to be so important. And I already know y'all are already doing this work right now. and we want to help support you in that work. So, like I mentioned, please utilize the Supporter Dialogue Toolkit. And that concludes today's part of my presentation.
Wow, thank you, Irene, for presenting such great and useful information. One of the reasons I enjoy hosting these webinars is because I also get to learn something new from our campus partners. I especially appreciate the toolkit that Safer created. I think that is an excellent resource for parents and supporters. So please check that out if you get a chance to. We do have some questions in the QA box from attendees. Irene, are you ready to answer some questions?
Yes.
All right, great. The first one I see here is the SAFER program the same as the Title IX office?
Great question. So no, we're not the same as the Title IX office. I can make that distinguishment. So SAFER and our advocates are confidential resources that might help support people who are going through the Title IX office and process. The biggest thing is we are confidential, meaning any disclosure of gender and power-based violence does not need to be reported. Unlike most staff and faculty here on campus, are mandated reporters, and disclosures of gender and power-based violence would have to be reported. They report to the Title IX office, and our Title IX office is upheld as a non-biased party, right, that helps either with those reporting processes. If a student wants to report to the Title IX office, receive supportive measures, and also receive maybe any information they might want from that. Title IX is not confidential, as in regards to they are the I guess presence, right, that staff and faculty report to as being mandated reporters. Now, Title IX, if there's any questions around that, whether your student is interested in reporting that process, they can always reach out to their office or reach out to SAFER as well to just get all of your students' options, whether what they want to kind of continue with.
Great, thanks, Irene. I see another question here that's really relevant to what we were just talking about. It says, does SAFER assist Cal Poly students when they need to navigate the legal rights of survivors of sexual assault and violence? I saw you making that distinction there, and I was wondering, and I think this person is wondering if SAFER helps the student navigate that process.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I hear the term legal, I'm going to assume Title IX or the criminal justice process. And so in a way, yes, as an advocate, we are state certified domestic violence and sexual assault crisis counselors and advocates. And so our specialty, like myself, is really knowing the law, knowing the process, and also not just explaining that and sharing that information with students and survivors, but also accompanying them. That could look like going to a law enforcement with them. That could look like showing up to court with them. That could look like going to that Title IX meeting with them. If you are talking about maybe legal resources like a lawyer or wanting to chat with a lawyer, we don't have one on our team, but we do have resources off campus that allow students and survivors really to either get information from one and also maybe support them through some of these criminal justice processes.
Great, thanks so much. Okay. This parent and supporter wants to know how they can support SAFER. Is there anything that they can do? I know that you talked about some things that they can talk with their students about, but does anything else come to mind when a parent asks, how can I support SAFER?
Yeah, I think one thing is there are multiple ways y'all can support SAFER. Like Kanani said, that Supporter Dialogue Toolkit, right? Keeping updated with it. We have a newsletter. It's also really just a way for you to learn more about maybe events happening on campuses, maybe initiatives, if you want to share that information like with your student or even, want to learn more about it. You can also follow us on Instagram or keep updated on our website. And if you're really, dedicated to helping support SAFER, also donating to our fund, which is on our website as well.
Okay, awesome. Irene, I have one more question here that just came in, and it says, I have heard that the first week of school is when the most sexual assaults occur. Is that true? And if so, what are some things Cal Poly does during that time in terms of prevention?
Yeah, great question. Now, I don't want to, I don't want to say the first week per se. I do definitely want to emphasize those first 6 weeks, but you're not wrong. And so, what are some ways that what we do? One, Safer is really trying to get out and about, right? So whether that we present to parents and supporters. We know we get a chance to get in front of your students at times. But also what we really want to do this year is really just try to let them know, right, what exists on campus. Getting them connected, right, is really going to be important and is going to play a major protective factor. So like the WOW, what is it, the show club, oh my gosh, showcase of all the clubs, right, learning about all of these resources during like our cultural weekends, our Mustang family weekends, right? Searching the websites. I know during housing move-in, they get kind of a lot of different brochures and magnets and swags from different resources. And so we really are getting in front of students in multitude types of ways. And I want y'all to know too, that even doing short little presentations in some of their classes right when they start can really be helpful too. So we're doing as much as we can to be visible. And I think playing a role with all y'all too can really help spread that word to your students.
Great. Thanks, Irene. I really want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to present for the parents and supporters today. Safer's contact information has been posted in the chat. I also want to thank you, parents and supporters, for joining us today. The Mustang Insights webinar series is a great way to stay connected to campus and receive up-to-date information directly from campus experts like Irene Tobias. Thank you so much. Stanley has also put all the contact information for parent and family programs there in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to our department with any questions in the future. We are the department that is there for the parent and supporter population. So have a great day, folks. Thanks again for joining us, Irene, and parents and supporters, and the External Relations Parent and Family Programs team. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.